Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Matthew Kirschenbaum. With my colleague, Dr. Carrie Krause, I co-direct BookLab in the Department of English at the University of Maryland. Today's discussion of anti-racist bookwork is being jointly sponsored by BookLab and the department's Center for Literary and Comparative Studies. Throughout academic year 2020 and 2021, the center has been hosting a series of discussions on anti-racist research, teaching, and public engagement. This series expresses a commitment to both supporting and acting upon the statements of solidarity for Black Lives Matter issued by the department, college, and the university. It also expresses the shared values of our intellectual community here at Maryland, including BookLab. I would like to thank my colleagues, Dr. Tita Chico and Dr. Karen Nelson, for their leadership in coordinating this effort, and our graduate assistants, Liam Daly, Danielle Griffin, and Aaron Bartlett, who have been and are working behind the scenes to facilitate the logistics. Our planning for today's session on anti-racist bookwork follows the mandate for all events in this series: to clear space with the offer of a platform and the promise of an audience. That's you, nearly 300 of you fulfilling that promise today. Thank you. And then to get out of the way. Our speakers are not in need of guidelines, guardrails, or goalposts, least of all from us. To that end, I will now offer very brief introductions of each and then turn the remainder of the hour over to them. I encourage you to use the Q&A and the chat to submit questions to our presenters and to respectfully contribute to the dialogue today. Tia Blassingame is Assistant Professor of Art at Scripps College in Claremont, California. She is the director of the Scripps College Press, as well as her own Primrose Press. Like many of you, I suspect, I first encountered Professor Blassingame online through her Twitter feed, which someone recently described as the best follow on Twitter. I concur, and her feed is distinguished by the constancy with which she uses it to share examples of student work from her printmaking and bookmaking courses. She holds an MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design, has been featured in numerous solo and group exhibitions, and not incidental to today's discussion, she is the founder of the Book Print Artist Scholar of Color Collective, which currently consists of several dozen members, all BIPOC printers, bookmakers, librarians, scholars, and educators. Dr. Curtis Small, Jr. is Senior Assistant Librarian and Coordinator of Public Services for Special Collections at the University of Delaware Library. He holds a doctorate in French literature from NYU, as well as an MLIS, and is a member of the staff of the Colored Convention's Digital Humanities Project. He is also a member of the aforementioned Book Print Artist Scholar of Color Collective, and in 2018 was profiled as a bright young librarian by Fine Books magazine. We're grateful they have agreed to take the time to join us today and extend their leadership and expertise to this event on anti-racist bookwork. Please welcome Professor Blassingame and Dr. Small. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew, and everybody who has put this together today and invited us. I really see this as an opportunity to really feature Tia and her work and to talk to her and to be in conversation with her, given the times we're living in and the way that the book arts community has started to respond, or has always responded really, to racism and white supremacy as really the frame for our conversation today. I discovered Tia's work. Unlike Matthew, I discovered your work, Tia, as a librarian. I discovered artist books when I became a librarian 7 years ago. And I wasn't familiar with the genre, right? So that has been a discovery. And once I started exploring it and exploring African-American artists' books in particular, Tia's name and Tia's work rose to the forefront of my attention, along with a few other people. So the library world and the book world being a small world, I was fortunate enough to not have a whole lot of trouble meeting Tia and starting to engage with her. And it's been wonderful to get to know her and her work, and to start to work with her on projects such as this. So first, Tia, I would like to ask you to talk a little bit about the reason for this conversation today, besides what I've already said.
Sure.
You know, it seemed like a great idea to me.
Yeah, so, I mean, of course, this conversation is timely. The subject of anti-racist bookwork is timely, you know, just from the sort of chaos and trauma of the summer. But for many people, it didn't start in the summer. It has been part of their existence, and something that they've had to navigate, the potential of violence, humiliation, and sort of limitation and erasure. For others, you know, they may have woken up to that with that slightly less than 9-minute video of someone being murdered, right? But I think when you think anti-racist bookwork, you know, to me, that is potentially an artist's book or print that tries to do some work, or at least get the viewer, the reader, to do some work in dismantling white supremacy, their notions of what their relationship is to that, and their sort of understanding of the world around them. And I think there have, you know, always been artists exploring that kind of subject matter. Sometimes that subject matter is simply related to their own lived experience and their identity, sometimes history and culture. I think it's exciting that we're in this moment, that we can have this kind of a conversation, because I don't know that the field sort of overall has done a great job of making space for these kinds of conversations. I think of Blackbibliographia, which I think was kind of earth-shattering, partly just for the excellence and sort of caliber of not just people who presented, but people who were there. And it really felt like a community. It didn't feel like you know, a symposium or a conference or anything like that. It just kind of felt like you came home to Black excellence, and people who are interested in book history and print culture. So I think this kind of a conversation and this sort of space, I think, is long overdue. And not to say that Blackbibliographia is the only time. I think of Jesse Erickson's extraordinary work organizing last year's AFA conference. So I think there have been moments, and I hope that this kind of a space and conversation isn't the only time that this kind of subject matter is sort of given space and focus.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned the Blackbibliographia. I do want to step back and acknowledge Blackbibliographia, a conference. Has it been just last year? Like you were saying earlier, Matthew, it's hard to believe that at the AFA conference was, and it really was last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that same year, we had the Blackbibliographia conference, which at University of Delaware, which I organized with my colleagues, Jesse Erickson and Laura Helton, and at which Tia was a keynote speaker. speaker. We had the AFA conference soon after at Maryland, organized by Jesse Erickson, which we were all at, Tia, Matthew, I, and probably everybody else who's supporting this. But I want to frame it in terms of what this part of the conversation, in terms of what the goals of Black Bibliographia were. And part of the goal was to bring together practitioners such as book artists and other practitioners, scholars, teachers, librarians, and scholars of print culture, not just artist books, but book artists and people who work on artist books. Right? And there are not a lot of people who have worked on Black artist books, right? Wouldn't you agree? It's an understudied, it's an understudied genre. And as a librarian, because I work with artist books and I work with print culture writ large, African-American print culture, other print cultures that I have to learn about for my job and my personal interest. So trying to break down those barriers, between artist books and the way that they engage with print and with the book form and other books, other traditions of book making. So I'm still trying to understand why the artist book, what is an artist book and why do they exist? And why do people decide that they're going to be book artists instead of some other, type of artist?
Sure. I mean, I think why artist books, it's this weird, uncanny thing that can take in any subject matter, any content. The idea of the form kind of, begins to explode. I mean, for me personally, I see books in everything. So right there, everything around me can become inspiration for, primarily for form, right? But you can take in bring in any kind of content into it. And, if you are open and flexible in your understanding of what the form can be, it's already this piece that potentially is personal. It can have connection with the reader, the viewer. It's time-based. You can pace it. You as the artist can try to kind of impose a set pacing upon it and thus the reader. But I also think a lot about the fact that everyone has some relationship to reading and books. Whether it was when you were young, someone read to you regularly, or they didn't, or you were able to purchase books or you could not. You had access to books or did not. So right off the bat, we all have kind of different relationships to reading and to books themselves. I think in a way that we don't really have not as universally with a lot of other kind of items, right? It's not just an object, but it's something that can take you somewhere else, right? It can educate you, you can develop your reading abilities. So we all have spent some amount of time with books, with reading, and then also there's another layer of our feelings or relationship to books and to reading. So I think right off the bat, that's pretty nuanced and pretty complicated. And it's something that everyone kind of around the world has some kind of relationship that, to some extent you have to unpack, right? But I think, our understanding of books as containers for knowledge, for information, for entertainment already before we bring them in as artist books adds to kind of endless possibility. I mean, a book can sort of not quite be right. You can note things that sort of fail, but there's always one aspect. I think of student work or work that I've worked on that didn't quite live up to my intentions, but there's always some kernel of something that's special, that's memorable, right? that you can connect with. So I can't move beyond this weird, uncanny thing that just has a potential to pull anything in and kind of come together in some manner. So I think particularly when you're thinking about anti-racism, issues of race, issues that are just really complicated and kind of overpowering, and we still don't even know how to really talk about them, right? To sort of move towards solutions, to have this thing that gives you space and time to start to kind of unpack or even understand someone else's experience in ways that may be really weird, but are going to be memorable. I think that's why artist books. I think the potential for artist books is endless. Talk to me in another 6 months, a year, 5 years, maybe I'll change my mind, but I haven't yet.
So when we talk about anti-racist bookwork, anti-racist artist books, what I personally, and I think you two are interested in, is making this work of artist books, of Black artist books, other book artists from underrepresented communities, a part of a tradition, right? What's the tradition? Artist books have not been worked on as much as they should, number one. And number two, that makes it harder to connect them to the tradition of anti-racist work that has happened in print culture in general, right? To define citizenship, to combat racism. So, that's sort of my interest, and that allows me, your work and other people's work allows me to see myself in certain ways as a subject who has been defined by books and reading. And African-American, some of the work that's happening, Elizabeth McHenry, Derek Spires, some of these scholars are helping us from that perspective to see how reading has been such an important aspect of African-American identity, citizenship, resistance, and so on. And so it seems to me there's nothing more interesting than this artist book to try to get at that in the broad, experimental, uncanny way that an artist book can, right? And your work, because you draw oftentimes on archival materials, historical topics, historical subjects, drawing on the archive, and making these connections between the present and the past in this really creative, powerful way. To me, it makes it easier to think about your work in terms of that tradition, So if you don't have anything to say to that.
Well, I was going to disagree with you because about tradition, because I think part of the problem of sort of locating anti-racist bookwork, artist books that explore specifically African-American experience and racism is that I think our notion of who can make an artist book, right? I think generally a lot of artists explore working in the book form. And I just think of the project from, I think, the 80s, Coast to Coast, that was specifically women of color working in the book form, over 100 of them, right? So how is that not part of a tradition? I mean, even for me, I know very little about that, but I think of, there were lots of book artists that we know about at this time who at that time who were present, who must have known about this project. But I know for me, as a graduate student trying to kind of locate information, particularly about African-American book artists, and maybe I framed it in the wrong way. Maybe we're framing it in the wrong way. Maybe it should have been book works by, in that case, by African-American artists. And then maybe that would put everyone on notice that there has been a tradition that we're not seeing as integral to our understanding of artist books. You know, I think of Faith Ringgold, who, you know, is, you know, the main organizer of Coast to Coast, you know, and her, I think, story quilts. Those quilts are artist books. You know, I think she probably sees them as artist books. I would love to have that conversation with her about that. But it doesn't seem like anyone else within the sort of book world, artist book world, sees those as really anything. You know, I think when you look at them, you take your time. There's text, even if you don't look at the text, there are scenes that she's creating, and you can spend time. There is clearly a narrative, many tied to historical events, historical individuals, that sort of begins to kind of do some work on you. So I think that there have been, looking at Black artists, I think there have been Black artists that made book works, and potentially anti-racist book works, but we don't sort of know about them or consider them as within the sort of artist book arts genre, and probably they don't think of themselves as artist book, or, you know, book artists either. You know, they're mixed media artists, sculptors, painters, what have you. I mean, I think of Leslie Sarr, you know, of the famous Sarr family, Betty Sarr's daughter, and her altered books, which I've seen maybe once, and I've never heard anyone speak about them at all. And I don't know that she considers herself a book artist.
Okay, so this is, yes.
So
this is another.
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry.
No. This is great, because my next question, let me warn you, is just going to be about specific work, and maybe I'll show some images. But before I get to that, that's another important question. For what you just said, uncovering work that's part of a tradition that we don't know about, right? That's a goal of this conversation. That's a goal of Blackbibliographia and a lot of us, right? Yeah. And then the other important question is connections, but how to contextualize artists' books. We already talked about tradition, but in relation to art, in relation to artists who at times work in the book form. You go to so many exhibits and you'll see a book or two. What's the connection? Why are they doing a book? How does this relate to trends in African-American art and other art? So all of these are fields of research, I hope that people will be able to tackle in the coming years. So time is flying.
Yes, of course.
Are there particular people, I think there are, and work that you would like to talk about in terms, you know, exemplary practitioners, inspirations?
I mean, thinking of artists, of anti-racist bookwork, I feel like that term is made for Clarissa Sly's book, Transforming Hate.
I will start sharing my.
Sure. I feel like to some extent I'm a proselytizer of this piece, just because I've seen what it can do, particularly with students. So I've taught a seminar, I think at the point that we initially started working with this book, it was Race and Identity in Book Arts. And the students had a chance to interview many folks, including Clarissa Sly. But this piece is just, it changes you if you take the time to read it. And of course, that's always seems to be a challenge with artist books. You know,
right.
Sort of like the beautiful trappings, the beautiful, you know, clamshell box and the printing and et cetera, and the materiality of it. But if you actually read this piece, you come out the other end a different person, right?
So let me just jump in. Can I just jump in? And I just want to make sure y'all can see my slide. You can
Yes.
see, right? Okay.
Mhm.
And I will jump in there that what you just said, what you said to me in person before about reading these books, another topic for research, right?
Mhm.
African American artist books as literature, because they are texts. And I went back and read it when I met you the first time. Same day, you were like, you need to read it.
I
I'm
was
a
probably like too close to you pre-pandemic, like, no, you need to read it.
I went back and read it, and as you said, I came out a different person. Transforming hate is a transformative reading experience.
Absolutely.
And we want to frame it. I'll just briefly frame it. She was asked to participate in an artist project for an exhibit, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Where artists were working with racist books, and they were asked to do something and to some type of artistic creation using these racist books as their material. And if you want to, whatever else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my first kind of encounter with this piece, you know, I'll admit to kind of seeing it and just thinking, okay, well, this is a commercially printed book. Like, it's not letterpress printed. Okay, the cover is kind of like a glittery paper. So initially it was a letdown just as an object, right? And then I thought, well, actually, I really trust Clarissa Sly. You know, I very much, you know, are sort of intrigued by all of her work. All of her pieces are so thoughtful. So I must be not understanding something huge about this piece. And I was, you know, I think having it commercially printed was really important so it could get into as many hands as possible. And it really wasn't about being this sort of precious object. It was about taking you on this journey that she had gone on and kind of pushing you further. And I think probably for many folks that collect artist books, maybe they had that similar encounter. I'm sure folks look at a lot of work and just looked at it and thought, like, this is kind of nothing. But I think it's so important to read artist books. You know, for the book art seminar that I teach at Scripps, that's sort of like the main point of the class. We're centered in the special collections library that right off the bat, Denison Library is gorgeous. And then students take their time to read work that's going to be about challenging subject matter. And it's not just you look over it and look at the pretty pictures and you know, read the colophon and move on, that you try to have the experience that the artist intended. And I think this can be a piece initially that can be hard to do because you're expecting, you know, all the bells and whistles that you're used to, but this piece doesn't need any of that. At its core, it's an anti-racist bookwork. It's a extraordinary artist book. I think for me, probably the strongest artist book that I've encountered to date. But you have to do what you do with any book for it to activate you in that change. You have to read it.
You know how many copies were made of this? I don't remember. This is
I mean, I want to say maybe it's like 1,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
it might be reprints. I'm not sure. So it's available. I mean, this semester I taught a studio class, artist books representing Blackness. And initially I was actually going to purchase this book as our, you know, text for the class and purchase it for every student. And, you know, I think I was at a point where, you know, we weren't sure if COVID was coming through the mail or what have you. And I didn't want to kind of complicate anyone's existence. So I didn't. But if it's still available in the future, I think I would, because I think it's a pretty special experience to have. And I think particularly to be able to sit without, you know, and sort of an audience.
Time is flying.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you one more question.
Sure.
drawing on what you just said, what do you, one of the things that frustrates me, I have to say, about artist books is that they're hard to find. You know, it's hard to know the genre exists. And then there are books that I may want to collect for our collection. They, you know, there were 6 made, there were 10 made. Can't find it anymore. I can't get your flags, the morning warning series to accompany. You know, what do you feel about that issue in terms of how book artists can still touch people with their work, given the nature of the production?
Sure. I mean, I feel like the sort of online experience can be wonderful and limiting. You know, of course, you want to experience and handle books in person, and there are only so many book dealers, and maybe there are a lot of folks that don't have dealers. I tend to like ask people. Sometimes it's word of mouth. I saw this amazing piece, or, you know, I heard a talk by someone, or someone mentioned this one person, and just be open to going down the rabbit hole. I think right now during the pandemic, I find that folks in the field are maybe a little bit more generous with information. And so there are a lot of individuals and collections that are posting, and artists who are posting, like sharing videos of their work that maybe didn't before. So it's not the same as being in person, but it's pretty close. I think it's also worthwhile for folks not to discount student work. I know when I was in grad school, I was told pretty clearly and vehemently not to share any work that I had created as a student, or that I was a student, if I was trying to sell work, because then no one would be interested, or would kind of discount the work that I had created. I think the book arts field is challenging to locate. It's challenging to locate for folks who consider themselves to be book artists. But I think that's part of what's kind of interesting about it, that everyone has a backstory of how they came to artist books. I mean, for me, I have a memory of, I think, a dinner party that my family was at, and someone was sharing, you know, regaling everyone with this, what I look back on and realize was an artist book that they were sharing with everyone. But I mean, that I was maybe like 12, so it took me decades to come back to this field, at a point when, you know, I was trying to make a project as prints, as an article, as anything, and not know, and sort of dancing around what I needed, which was the book form and artist books, but I didn't know that's what was missing.
So this, I promise this is the last question. I know we're pushing up against the limit, but, you know, we're only going to have one of these conversations.
Right.
Is there anything, what would you like to say about the collective and its purpose?
Sure. So the collective, and I know our title is crazy, but I want to kind of clarify that the collective brings together BIPOC artists, so book artists, printmakers, paper makers, you know, paper cut artists, printmakers, on and on and on, letterpress printers, with scholars of book history and print culture. Those scholars are not necessarily BIPOC, but they do have some interest and scholarship around book work, book history, print culture related to those different groups. And so really the point of that group is to be in conversation, in collaboration, but to support the members of the group in whatever ways they need. You know, if someone needed anything right now, I would, you know, we'd work and find a way to get that to them. It's about community as well, because I think the field broadly kind of has discounted or pushed aside work by BIPOC book artists and the history of those groups related to books and reading, and the notion of a BIPOC artist and their artistry. I think it's still something that I think all kind of art fields are struggling with.
Yeah, when we were talking the other day, you discussed it in those terms, in terms of support, and and I realized that notion was connecting with so much of what I think we need as however we're connected with the book world. Very often our institutions and the profession has not supported all of us in the way that it should. There are many stories about the struggles that people have, whatever their practice. So that crystallized for me how this collective, and I'm saying this for people who maybe some point in the future may be a part of the collective or listening to a supportive community. And we don't even know yet just the forms of support that might take. But this, absolutely. I'm seeing this as a part of a tradition, like the color conventions, where we come together to support each other in ways that we're not being supported anywhere else. So that's what makes it so exciting. And this is the last thing I'm going to say before I open it up. I think this time when we've had protests, it has given many of us a chance to reassess what we do and think about what we do.
Yeah.
And, that time, when I started to think, it led me to one of the things, why am I in this profession? Well, part of it is that I've discovered artist books and work like Clarissa Sly's and your work, and how that can fuel our creativity and our thinking. So if you want to add a rejoinder, I know we need to open it up to questions.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing briefly, and then we'll open it up. But I do feel like, I had a chapter in Freedom of the Presses that was published through Booklab. Really kind of my letter to the field that I couldn't have been more clear. Thank you, Matthew. To students in book arts, to practitioners, organizations, collectors, all the things that everyone should already know and has to already know, but they're not doing, right? To make space, particularly for Black book artists and Black book work, right? And I hold firmly to all of that, particularly my suggestions to students, to sort of demand space from the folks who are there on their campuses around book arts. But I feel like to some extent, I stand by everything I said, but it was sort of seeing that it was sent to, however well-meaning, I wasn't really interested in waiting for all those different parts of the field to do anything. And so it's exciting to see some kind of shift that came out this summer. I don't know how optimistic I am that will continue and be like the new normal for the field. But in many ways with this group, I kind of don't care. We can do everything that should have been done and more ourselves. And if folks in the field are interested and want to be part of what we're doing, great. If they're not, that's great too. And a big part of the group is going to be our collaborations. And so things like our conversation today, Curtis, but even making new work collaboratively. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. That's a wonderful final statement. That's what I was trying to get at.
Trying to rile me up.